Friends, thank you for watching. There's something I wanted to bring up about the White House farm murders. Now, if you've never heard of that, I encourage you to look into that. I'm not going to give a whole breakdown of it. It was a miserable, terrible event. 5 people were killed. Now, the one person, possibly Sheila, she could have killed the 4 others and then committed suicide, or she could have been killed herself and there could have been 5 murders. Sheila's 2 sons, who were 2 young boys, were murdered, and it was just really terrible. But I do think a miscarriage of justice may have occurred in Essex County, Great Britain. Forgive me for my voice. I tested positive for strep throat, and my voice isn't very strong right now. But anyway, I've done quite a bit of research on this. Here's a point I want to have. The early morning of the murders, Jerry Bamber is outside of the farm with the initial police that came. Now, the initial police, in their notes, they admit that Jeremy said, "Isn't that movement in the window?" And they look, and they thought, "Yeah, that does look like human movement in the window." Well, then they go back and they say, well, with the way the stars were and the moon, and the way it reflected on the glass, it looked like movement, but it wasn't. Well, okay, I get that. Sometimes windows and lightings can do optical illusions. But I actually, there's sources that claim that in some of the police notes, the initial policeman here, and I'm not just talking about one source, this is mentioned multiple times. The initial policeman or someone from the police, they were in conversation with someone inside the farmhouse before the police stormed it. The police didn't go into the house right away. They waited till they had backup and they had, the tactical gear to go into the house. And one reason, because they thought the murderer was actually still in the house and they were having a conversation with someone in the house. Well, Jeremy Bamber was on the outside of the house with the police. So a question I guess I have is, how can we be sure that Jeremy Bamber killed his family when actually the police are having a conversation with someone that they're leery of, which is causing them reason to hesitate to go in the house? That doesn't really make sense to me. And I think has that been covered up a little bit? I don't know. There's actually some people that reported that they saw Sheila. Now, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I believe that Sheila actually committed the crime. But all I'm saying is that there's more than one source that says that I've read that the police were having conversations with someone inside the house while Jeremy was on the outside. So how can we say that Jeremy was guilty of it? That just doesn't make sense. To me, that's one of those things that beyond a reasonable doubt, can we really say that Jeremy's guilty? And here's another point that we need to think about. Now, this was according to the police notes. When the police initially went into the farmhouse, the White House farmhouse, there was 2 deceased bodies on the first floor, and then there was 3 deceased bodies on the second floor. The 2 boys and the mother, the grandmother of the 2 boys were on the second floor. The grandfather of the 2 boys, he was on the first floor. And here's the deal. Sheila, the 2 boys' mother, who had a history of mental illness, when the police first came in, her body was on the first floor, according to sources that I've seen. And I don't think that's even much of a debate. Her body was actually on the first floor. But they didn't verify that she was deceased because they saw 2 bodies on the first floor and they wanted to check the whereabouts of the other people in the house. So they didn't check her pulse, I suppose. I don't know. But somehow, while the police were in the house, Sheila's body went from being on the first floor to the second floor. How can that happen? Police don't move bodies. You know, police, they might try to resuscitate somebody, but they're not going to move your body from the first floor to the second floor. Doesn't that kind of raise suspicion that possibly Sheila wasn't dead? She had a gunshot wound to the head. She ended up having 2 gunshot wounds to the head. And I think a common misconception is people think, well, if you shoot yourself in the head, you're one shot's all it takes. Well, I saw a stat where actually 8% of killings, someone had to shoot themselves twice. So just because you shoot yourself in the head doesn't mean you're going to kill yourself. My point is that it seems that there's a possibility that Sheila could have harmed herself on the first floor, and then after the police were in the house and they were searching, she could have snuck up a back steps and she could have shot herself again on the second floor, and that could have been the fatal shot. How else would you explain her moving the body? Jeremy didn't move her body. You can't accuse him. I mean, with the police there, with Jeremy being the lone family member on site, do you think that they would actually let him out of their sights and let him have access to the house? Of course not. So how do you explain Sheila's body going from the first floor to the second floor? And how do you explain the initial police officers having at least some sort of conversation with someone inside the house while Jeremy is on the outside of the house? Now, I know there's a lot of things that you could say that will... I know you can say that Jeremy didn't show remorse, that he had crocodile tears during the funeral, and then he I know his girlfriend during the time they broke up, but she had her testimony against Jeremy that she actually was paid for, I believe, later by a newspaper article for her, her side of the story. It hurt his case pretty bad. But, kind of like Scott Peterson was, in many ways, Scott Peterson was convicted on circumstantial evidence. Well, Jeremy, in many ways, he was convicted not because there was any hard evidence against him, but more because of his attitude. For instance, he took a vacation, after his family they were brutally murdered. And people think, well, who would take a holiday in that situation? But friends, you can't be convicted on how you handle grief. Everyone handles grief differently. And how we react to every situation when it's under a telescope, do we want the court of law to prosecute us on that? I really would like your feedback, because I don't see how Jeremy can be convicted if the police truly were having a conversation with someone that they were suspecting of the crime inside the house while Jeremy was outside the house. Now, we can talk about fake phone calls. We can talk about this, evidence with the, findings of the silencer and whether Sheila actually could have killed herself or not. We can go on into that, But Jeremy certainly would not have moved her body from the first floor to the second floor while he was on the outside. And, people are going to say, well, either Jeremy had to do it or Sheila had to do it. Is it really even that cut or dry? I think when we back ourselves into a corner like that, we're leaving all sorts of avenues open. It could be a third party. A third party could have committed the murder. Now, do I know the motives? No, I don't know. Some people murder and I have no idea what the motives are. But a red flag comes up in my head whenever someone says, well, it has to either be this or that. Well, does it really? So, anyway, I would like your, I'm trying to start a conversation here, and I would like your feedback. Now, with the Lisa Ann Froon and Chris Kramer's case, I know in some of my videos I came across maybe a little bit kind of hard and not real humble, and that was a mistake of mine. I want to be more humble here. I don't have all the answers. I don't know. And that's kind of like why I want to ask you. And anyway, I would like to have a discussion on it. So, friends, thank you for watching. God bless you and take care.